Nadia Buttendorf, creator of the finger ring, would be widely known as a visual designer and creator of obscure jewelry and accessories. One particular creation of hers would go viral for reasons unforeseen to her: the infamous finger ring. In the age of artificial intelligence technology, people would find an alternative reason for the finger ring. Due to the occasional imperfection of the AI generating multiple fingers, criminals may start wearing extra prosthetic fingers to make surveillance footage look like it's an artificially generated image, thus inadmissible as evidence.
Oh, I'm weird. Look, this finger is too short.
That's your thumb.
Is it? Then what's this?
Oh my god, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Not today, thought the crab as he escaped his cellophane prison at this Japanese market. Crabs and lobsters are often required to be sold alive. As soon as they die, bacteria starts exponentially multiplying in as little as minutes to hours of decomposition, and they can become very toxic to eat. Users on TikTok have expressed outrage and empathy, noticing that these crabs are being suffocated in their containment. Packing live crabs in fish markets is often related to ensuring the freshness and quality of the seafood, and is generally considered fresher than pre-cooked or frozen seafood. Some culinary traditions emphasize the importance of seafood being as fresh as possible to highlight the delicate flavor and texture of the creature that's being prepared for consumption. However, the process of capturing, handling, and the confinement in small spaces can be stressful for live animals and cause them unnecessary suffering. Unfortunately, regulations and practices can vary in different locations, sparking an ongoing debate about the treatment of seafood animals. In 2019, the Dutch police arrested a bird with its owner for taking part in a robbery. The bird was then put in a jail cell with bread and water. Police shared a picture of the bird on their Instagram page stating, "We recently arrested a suspect for a shoplifting. During the arrest, we found a sneaky witness with feathers and beak on the suspect's shoulder." When the media reported the story, they put a little black bar over the bird's face to protect its identity. Now, it's a jailbird. In 2014, 24-year-old Daniela Liverani from Edinburgh had been having frequent nosebleeds for weeks. She believed were due to a motorcycle accident. While in the shower, she felt something coming out of her nose. She rushed to the hospital as quickly as she could. When she arrived, doctors informed her that a 3-inch leech had been living inside her nostrils, causing the bleeding. They removed the creature with forceps and tweezers. Daniela looks at the leech and nicknames it Mr. Curly. The doctors did a great job. Hats off to them, because obviously they don't see something like that every day, she says to reporters. Daniela believes she may have contracted the leech during her travels in Vietnam or Cambodia. After the trip to the hospital, she took Mr. Curly home with her. Not as a pet, however. Later that night, she would boil Mr. Curly alive before throwing him away. The oarfish, also known as the Doomsday Fish. They're considered the largest bony fish in the world and swim vertically as a method for searching for prey. Oarfish aren't particularly aggressive and don't have the muscle mass to thrash their long bodies with much force. While many legends may surround these creatures, it is unusual for humans to encounter oarfish. They primarily reside within the deep sea, so if one is spotted close to the surface, it typically indicates that the creature is sick, dying, or at least disoriented. Some locals believe that the fish come to the surface just before an earthquake, as there have been instances of them appearing just before massive natural disasters, thus giving them the name Doomsday Fish. Seeing one in the water or even washed up on shore is considered an omen of tragedy to come.
Hello, my name's Richard Britton, and I'm a Countdown champion. If you're a British viewer, you probably immediately recognise me as the winner of Series 55, which I won back in 2006. Countdown. If you're not a British viewer, I can tell you a bit about Countdown. It's a words and numbers game show, anagrams mostly, a bit of maths, and it's probably one of the most celebrated game shows in British television history. It was also the first show to be broadcast on Channel 4 back in 1982, and I've won a series of it. And
in September 2012, Richard Britton had been accepted as a student at Greenwich University in London to study history. He was described as a bit of a loner, but would frequent the student union bar, where he met barmaid Ella Durant, also a student who was studying drama and politics. She described him as a bit odd, but harmless. They would both team up together in a pub quiz. He would hug her whenever their team did well, which made her feel odd, but didn't think too much into it. He would suggest that she joined a team he was forming to represent Greenwich University. She agreed and filled in the application forms. However, needing a photo of her, he would go through all of her photos on Facebook and message her frequently about how beautiful she was. Ella became a bit concerned about Richard's infatuation. She started to notice he would only come during the time she worked at the pub and would sit and stare at her. At this point, she unfriended him on Facebook and told him directly he was being too forward. Richard decided to take this opportunity to tell her how he really felt and expressed that he was in love with her. She backed out of the team entirely and asked him to leave her alone. April 2013, university authorities made Richard sign a contract promising to stop harassing Ella, but within a month of signing, he had begun sending love letters to her home address, having learned her address from the university challenge application forms she had filled out. So Ella contacted the police. Richard stopped 6 months after the police warning, but later that year, Ella was returning to the university for her graduation. I abstained for 6 months, but I learned that she was returning to Greenwich for her graduation, and I went to see her. As chance would have it, she was positioned at the far end of one row, in front of where I was standing. She saw me and tried to swap with the person next to her, but it was too late. As the photo was taken, I was standing near her. In 2014, he located Ella's address by tracing her mother on the electoral register. He had once again started sending more poetry and drawings of them together, one of which featured them holding hands with 2 children. In February, Richard sent her a Valentine's Day card which featured a wild drawing of a character named Ella Tundra, which would be the inspiration and start of his self-published book, The World Rose. Richard created a blog during this time, and in it he began justifying his behavior, comparing his love to that of Romeo and Juliet. He also quotes lyrics from the Beatles' I'll Get You, as well as Sting's Every Breath You Take, justifying that neither artist are creepy stalkers, and therefore it is okay to be a stalker as long as your intentions are good. These songs are about obsessional love, which is both natural and beautiful. Benevolent stalking is different to malevolent stalking. The latter is intended to cause harm or induce fear, but the former is purely an expression of affection. After failing to reach Ella through poems and drawings, he would write The World Rose, a story revolving around central character Ella Tundra. In his blurb, he describes it as an epic fairy tale romance set in a semi-fictional ancient world containing elements of action, adventure, poetry, and comedy. The title has a triple meaning. The central character is a renowned beauty, the rose of the world, while the rose flower features heavily in the plot, and it also implies that the world rose up. When Ronwin Drake discovers treasures in a distant paradise, a new golden age seems set to begin. Ella Tundra will find that all which glitters is not gold, as she faces many obstacles in her quest for true love. Richard submits his written Mona Lisa to Wattpad, a platform for authors and readers to collaborate and give feedback on their stories, with the potential to get picked up by big publishers or even Hollywood entertainment companies. Richard tried reaching out to Ella on Twitter after learning she had moved to Glasgow, Scotland, but to no avail. One autumn evening, Ella finishes a shift at work and is immediately frozen with fear. There was Richard waiting for her on a bench outside of the store. According to Richard, he would explain, "I decided to try to make my book known by getting into the national news. I found out that she worked in Glasgow, so I traveled there with a plan. I was going to tell her that if she came with me and we faked a kidnapping, we would both become famous. We would go into the hills and camp out for a few days while the nation searched. I had brought the necessary supplies." Ella snapped out of her fear. How are you here?" she said to him. She snapped a photo of him and went to the police. Unfortunately, the police weren't able to find him. She went back to work a few days later, and there he was again waiting for her. She once again contacted the police, but they weren't able to help her. Richard admitted defeat. He never got the chance to ask her what she thought of his plan to kidnap her. "I left Glasgow, and I think our relationship is finished now. I gave it my best shot. I really thought that we would both become famous. We would have disappeared for a few days. People would have read my book, and she could have played the lead role when The World Rose would be made into a movie. But alas, I'll have to find another way." When he returns home to Bedford, he goes online to see how reviews of his epic tale of romance are coming along. Reviews start coming in, and they're not very positive. Common critiques are that there are multiple inconsistencies, needless details, punctuation errors, two-dimensional characters. The main character is lacking personality, frail and dainty, but is also great at hiking. Richard is not very pleased. Rather than taking advice and trying to improve his work, he would take the time to explain to his critics why they were wrong, and he was right. One review in particular catches his attention, however. A long scathing review from Paige Rowland, an 18-year-old nursing student from Fife, Scotland. She goes into extreme detail about what she disliked about the book, ranging from the cover art to the blurb, characters, and writing style. Something inside Richard snaps. He starts to send Paige anonymous messages through Wattpad, telling her how she is a terrible person and never going to amount to anything. He also started stalking her social media accounts and learned she worked part-time stacking shelves in an Asda supermarket in Scotland. Richard would then set out on his 400-mile journey to meet her. On the 3rd of October 2014, he arrives at Paige's work, walking up and down the aisle searching for her. He finally finds her in the cereal aisle, stocking the shelves. He heads to the alcohol aisle, picks up a bottle of wine, and then returns, walking directly behind her. He then strikes her on the head. A gash forms across her head, and she is bleeding profusely. He drops the bottle and walks out of the store without saying a word. Paige is immediately rushed to the hospital, where she receives multiple stitches for the wound in her head. Thanks to CCTV footage of the event and using cell tracing, police tracked Richard down and arrested him for assault. Paige updated her 1-star review of The World Rose with this to say, "The writer of The World Rose is arrogant. So arrogant, in fact, that my review hit him where it hurts a little too hard. In return, he found out where I worked through Facebook, came from London to where I live in the east of Scotland, and attacked me by hitting me over the head with a wine bottle from behind, not a word or a sound. And then he left. I had to be taken to hospital to receive medical treatment for it, which included several stitches in my head. Make sure you are internet safe. Check your privacy settings, because sick men like Mr. Britton do exist. For those asking, of course charges are being pressed. I required medical attention, and had the hit been anywhere else, or had I been hit harder, I could have died. Don't worry. I am making sure things are being done about this." Richard would plead guilty to attacking Paige and also confessed to stalking Ella for 3 years before that. He was sentenced to 2.5 years, but this wasn't the end. He was released only after 13 months, and immediately contacted Paige, sending a poem to her home address. It turns out he had internet access while he was in prison, and was obsessing over her during his entire sentence. Reports say the poem he sent referred to her as his Scottish thistle and my love Paige, ending his poems saying, "This page is torn because we are torn without each other." Later, he sent her a Facebook message saying, "I dreamed of you last night. Are you going to send me back to prison? Maybe I need it. I'm bored out of my mind. How is the nursing degree going? I was quite surprised they revealed such information about you in court. I was tempted to get a bus ticket to come visit you, but I thought that might look weird. Any chance we could just become friends, actually? We could keep our communications secret like we did in last night's dream." Soon after, he messaged her one last time, apologizing for his message, and begged her not to tell anyone. The last information available about Richard is that he is in a psychiatric ward in England and hasn't continued to harass or stalk anyone else since.